to A Tiny Revolution, a podcast about ordinary folk living revolutionary lives. I'm here this week with one of my friends. We met on the internet and then we met in real life. And ever since then, it's just been kind of a delicious friendship. It's Andre Henry. Artist, musician, author of the new forthcoming book, All the White Friends I Could Not Keep, and somebody who I just enjoy a lot. Hi, I love you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me again. It's good
You
to see
know,
you.
it's a pleasure. Um,
I just want
so
everyone listening though to know that I am gonna drink this tea while
mhm,
we're talking, so there will be
100%.
slurping.
Please, absolutely. That's how you know it's good. People also know on here. They also get like enough of like my lighter sounds like all the time, just all the time. So because this is my podcast and I can do what I want to. I'm not like your mom's podcast. My
Your
mom would never.
mom's.
This ain't your mom's
This
podcast.
ain't your
Like,
mama's podcast.
anyways, so I've been asking people this season, which I think is weird to say that this is, but I take like 4 months off. So I guess like the first 150 episodes of season one, everything after the seasons. Um, but how do you introduce yourself to people these days? Like, assuming that they're dope and not gonna like, dig deep. Like, it's like, what do you do? What's your thing?
Yeah, what do you do? Okay, so first off, I've been working to make this a lot shorter. I
The
went,
elevator pitch.
oh yeah, because I'm taking the pressure off myself to give anyone the totality of who I am, right?
Hmm.
You know.
You
Uh,
couldn't know it in
so
one sentence.
I don't even know it in one sentence. Ooh. um,
Mm.
so I mean, I just tell people now, I'm a singer songwriter and a writer. Sometimes I tell them that I am a singer songwriter with a deep passion for racial justice,
Hmm.
or something like that.
Perfect. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a great way to start it off because, like, I'll
Mhm.
tell people just like, "What do you do?" I'm just like, "I'm trying to start a spiritual reformation." You can't say that to people. It's like, I'm a life coach and I have a podcast.
Right, right.
That's
Unless
also
this
this is
unless this is a dating situation. Now, if someone's asking me on a date, what do I do? I can't tell them those things because then it sounds like I'm broke, which I am.
I mean, let's be honest. Like, honesty at the gig. That's where I'm at. Like, and listen, like, been there, have been there. Some days still are. It's
then, then I'm like, I'm a marine biologist. No, I'm lying. I don't tell people on dates that I'm a marine biologist. I give them my day job. You know.
yeah. I
Yeah.
um I recently like I kind of started seeing a young man recently. I
Okay.
know, shocking. Um, doesn't have any church trauma or drama. Doesn't
How do you
like
manage that?
I know, like sweet, sweet guy, very, very nice. And I kind of like was like, but like he weirdly enough listened to my podcast a little bit beforehand, so he did know about who I was a little bit before we met and then became friends and then started dating. But
Mm,
it's never worked out before where like someone has
mhm.
known me from the internet and
Right.
then
Yeah.
become, I don't know. So maybe that's the answer. We got to use our clout as podcasters to really I don't know. Also, clout as
That's the key.
podcasters, LOL. I hate it.
That is the key. And follow us for more relationship tips. Tell
Yeah,
people
as
you're
you
a podcaster.
Jesus. Um so not to like parlay into the book, but I
Yeah.
remember when you first started writing this book, like, and you were
Oh
getting
yeah.
your ideas together. Oh yeah, because we were sitting in your LA apartment before we went on a walk. It was like the first time we'd ever hung out, I think.
Oh yeah. And I was working on the proposal, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were talking as I'm racking my brain for all of these people, like all these stories keep coming to mind of all of these white friends who just like when I tried to explain, I was like, oh, this isn't gonna work. And like all the things that
Mhm,
like I had to leave behind when I left this world that
mhm.
continuously so yeah, that's where it started. Where is it now?
Well, it's a published book. I mean,
It's
about a
happening.
week and a half. Yeah, a week and a half away from publishing now, and it's changed a lot since we talked about that idea because as you and many others know, the book came out of a blog post that I wrote in 2019 called "To All the White Friends I Couldn't Keep," where I literally wrote an open letter to many of the white people that I talk about in the book. But at the time when I wrote the blog, I was like kind of writing a defense, right, of what had happened
Mm,
between us because they were going around saying, or I shouldn't say they, a couple of them were going around
mm.
saying on the internet, Andre Henry's a racist. He hates white people, blah, 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 blah,
Sorry.
blah. Yeah. Yeah. And I
Just
was
like the
like,
phrase Andre Henry is a racist. Oh my god, can we put that on a shirt? I'd buy that.
Andre Henry is a racist. I'm sure
Very,
many
very
people would
much
buy that
boycott
shirt.
Beyonce vibes. You know what I'm saying?
I'm sure there are a lot of people that you might be able to actually make a bag off of that shirt if you did it.
Listen.
And I said to myself, well, my logic at the time was, you can't just go around saying that I hate white people without a receipt. Like, where did I say that? Screenshot the blog post, the text message, the tweet, the Facebook post, whatever it is where I said that I hate white people. You can't do it because it's not there. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write you a receipt of my love. That's why I wrote this blog. So I can
Mm,
explain, I loved you. I've always loved you. The thing that is separating us is not hate, but your refusal to listen to what I'm trying to tell you about my Black life, right?
mhm.
Okay, so that blog went viral, which writing tip,
I remember
everyone.
writing it. I remember reading it. It was very good.
Thank you. Which writing tip, everyone, proofread your stuff because you never know which one is going to
Theme
go
of the
viral.
fucking day. Theme of the
Like,
fucking day.
really, really look over that thing and make sure that you're ready for the off chance that hundreds of thousands of people will read that thing because I wrote that thing like a text message. Like I just like vomited onto my website and then click send. you know. So anyway,
Listen, that's the best kind of blog in my opinion. It's also amazing to me. I'm just like the ones I spend the least amount of time on. Viral. The ones that are so thoughtful.
mhm.
Ain't nobody care. Ain't
well
nobody
for
care sometimes.
Well, seriously, like there is something about like when you are exhibiting that kind of vulnerability and you're sharing from your gut, right?
Mhm.
That resonates with people. And I see that in general. Like when I'm just kind of like, I just need to get this out, like those blogs always do better. But anyway, when an agent reached out about this blog and felt like there was a book in it, and I was like, I don't know about that because I don't sell
Mm.
books, but you do sell books. So if you feel like there's a book in here, let's talk about it. And we started developing that. And I thought that I was just going to expand that open letter into like a book long open letter, you know,
Mhm.
and write to all the white friends I couldn't keep. But by the time I was like 75% of the way through with that book proposal, I realized that's not the book that I want to write
Mhm.
because I was beyond it, at that point. Like
Right.
I didn't want to spend any more time trying to persuade the white friends that I couldn't keep to think differently. And
Mhm.
so I decided that I wanted to shift the angle on it and write a book that would have been useful to me when I first started speaking up about racism and when I started trying to convince the white friends that I couldn't keep. Basically, a
Mm.
book that I could give to younger Andre and say, hey, save your energy and your time.
Mhm.
These people are not movable. So leave them alone. And you get down to the business of studying this system of racism and
Mhm.
nonviolent struggle and figuring out what can you really do among people who are already interested in doing that kind of work to intervene against the flow of racist power.
Mhm. Something you told me, I think it was around the first time we hung out, it's just like, if it's not going to result in the saving of Black lives, what and why am I gonna do this? And, like, 'cause,
Yeah.
like, that was that was like a similar sentiment, like, I had with, like, when I was and still share myself about like the only thing I care about is keeping queer people alive.
Yeah.
And I think people like really underestimate these two very like true, very simple things. I'm just like, there are some people out here, you can give them all the data, you can have the right hermeneutic, you can even give them your blood, sweat, tears, time, body, mind, and soul. And at the end of the day, they're still going to be seduced by power. They're going to choose preservation. And it's just like, don't. So like, what was the thing for you? When did you notice that you were wasting your time, and how did you start to shift?
I read about this in the first chapter of the book. No, yeah, the first chapter after the introduction. And it was a conversation I had with a woman that was the middle school pastor's wife of my home church, who had reappeared on Facebook years later when I was an adult,
Like a ghost.
and there were a lot of people when I announced on Facebook that I was going to Fuller in 2014. There were a bunch of people that I'd known for my whole life that were like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. And they feel like, Andre posts a lot. So we're basically going to see him like go through this whole process of seminary and can't wait to see what he's going to do with it. So she's one of those people, right? And near the end of I guess near the end, because of a seminary degree is 2 or 3 years. So about a year in, I started posting a little bit more about racism after the riots in Baltimore, after Freddie Gray was killed by the police.
Right.
And she starts showing up and being way more active in my comment section around this time. And gosh, the riots erupted in Baltimore, I think because of the way that if I remember correctly, it was because of the verdict that was rendered because of the police.
Yeah.
Or verdict rendered about the police who killed Freddie Gray.
Yeah.
So and actually, as I'm thinking about it, I remember there were a couple other voices that are speaking up and saying, oh, those people who are breaking those windows and rioting and stuff, they have bad parents and they just need to, that kind of rhetoric, right?
Right.
And I found myself gently trying to push back on these ideas. And I did that for a while. I mean,
gracefully responding to a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, like just trying to be very gracious and articulate in my response, thinking like, if I am generous with them, then at least they can't dismiss me. They can't tone police me, which I didn't have that language at the time, but they can't tone police me and dismiss me because I sound quote unquote angry. And I found that for the weeks that I tried that with white people, it didn't work.
Yep.
Like when I tried to be generous and gracious about my response to them, it just made it easier for them to dismiss me. And I brought up that woman because for weeks she would respond to everything and try to, in her own way, also kind of gently undercut everything that I would say by trying to all lives matter the post, or say that because she was a white woman who spent time abroad and she felt mistreated, then somehow she can weigh in on how Black people are treated in America, which I find is a common thing that many white people do. They're like, well, I've been to this other country and I felt mistreated there, and therefore Black people should stop protesting about this stuff. Which, if that didn't make sense to you, it's because it doesn't make sense.
Ding dong. I'm just like, yeah. That's one of my favorite phrases. It doesn't make sense because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. The logic is not logicking.
Not a bit.
I realized after a while that this person is actually not trying to have a discussion about this. They just want to raise doubts about whether or not I actually know what I'm talking about. They're gaslighting me.
Yeah.
They are questioning my perception of reality, not even just my perception, but my ability to perceive reality in a reliable way.
Ooh. Ooh.
And when I started realizing that a lot of white individuals were doing that, um, I started saying, okay, well then, if it doesn't matter how I say it, then I may as well be more direct about it, first off.
Mhm.
Right? Because
Mm.
trying not to be direct about it just makes it just makes it unclear, makes it more obscure what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, saying that hello, everyone, this is not a debate, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is exactly what I started saying. I started saying, listen, there are not two valid sides to the conversation about racial justice, right?
Mhm.
Like, if you're saying Black people are inherently criminal and deserve to experience the systemic violence that they have since the founding of this country, and someone is saying Black people are worthy of care and are just as much human beings as everybody else and deserve to live their lives without fear of random, wanton racial violence, one
Mhm.
of those people is wrong.
Period.
Yeah.
Like, I try to be as, like, woo-woo, non-dual as I can be, but, like, there are certain things, like, there is such a thing as good and bad and right and
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's like, well, you shouldn't label it. I was like, okay, so this is how I'm going to say it is good. Good is when humans are flourishing. Bad is
Mhm.
when anyone is not. And
Yeah.
so it's like well, so when I look at this argument that this quote unquote argument this person's putting forward, at the end of the day, I'm going to say like this is resulting in people getting hurt. And like I don't need to. If you want to argue with it, that's fine, but you're just kind of showing your ass.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't negate the fact of what's still going on.
Yeah, I didn't
Fool.
understand the pow I didn't
Sorry.
understand the pervasiveness and the power of anti-Blackness. So,
Mm,
like, when we talk about having, like, kind of dispassionate, reasonable dialogue with someone about the topic of race, and you're Black,
mm,
right? I didn't understand that a lot of white people, or I like to borrow and mess around with James Baldwin's, construction of this, that people who actually believe that they're white,
right.
um, that they enter these conversations with a superiority complex, and I really don't think that they realize it. I don't think many of them realize that they have it, but they do.
Oh,
They
yeah,
assume,
and it's clear very soon who does
yeah,
and
like,
who's maybe a little bit more conscious.
right, so we can't have a rational discussion about this, a reasonable discussion about this, because they think that they're talking to an inferior. Like they literally do believe that they are able to weigh in on an experience of the society that they first off have not experienced themselves in their bodies,
Mhm,
that they have studied not at all. They've not read one book, not watched one
mm,
video, not read one study. So they don't know the history and the dynamics of how these things work, nor have they ever spent a day trying to fight it. So they don't know the ways that
mm,
people respond when you're trying to fight against this kind of thing. But they feel like they can weigh in as an authority on all these things and tell you how you should be thinking about this, how you should respond to it, how you should fight against it. And trying to debate with these people made no sense
mm,
because they didn't believe that I was capable of knowing what was happening
of
in my own life.
knowing or perceiving correctly.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mm. And then that's, like, the really big question is, like, so why I wonder, at least for you, like, why do you and this is probably a question for everybody, like, why did we engage for so long? Why did we try to engage with people who who could not be on a level playing field with us?
There are a couple of reasons I did. One was that that's what everybody tells you you're supposed to do. That's a part of the common sense
Mm,
of the society that we grew up in, is that there is this pervasive idea that if you just sit down and if you just come to the table and they put their perspective out there and you put your perspective out there, then you can come to some sort of agreement, right?
mhm,
And so that is under that is based on some of the presuppositions that we've already said. Okay, that's bullshit, right? Like
mhm.
everyone's perspective isn't even valid and doesn't deserve a hearing, you know.
Yeah.
especially if their so-called perspective is, directly linked to your harm, right? Like if
Correct.
their quote unquote perspective is, well, Black people are inherently criminal and violent, and there's something wrong with their families and their family structures and this kind of stuff, and that's why they deserve the violence that they experience, or at least are to blame for the violence they experience in the world.
Mm,
I'm not going to sit here and listen to you say that, right?
right.
But that's what people constantly tell. I mean, I can't. If I had $1 for
Just
every
one.
time, yeah, for every time somebody told me that the way that we create change is to persuade our most virulent opponents of our humanity,
Mm.
right? I would be Jeff Bezos. I mean, like,
Listen, to the moon.
you know, um, that is the pervasive idea. And what I learned on this journey that I write about in this book is that there may be a role for people sitting down for coffee or lunch or whatever and
Mhm,
trying to help somebody see that their bad ideas are bad. You know,
mhm.
there may be a place for that. And in fact, we know of one guy, I can't remember his name right now, but he's a Black man, and he has befriended Klansmen and helped them to see the error of their ways and helped them leave the Klan. Right?
Mhm.
Hey, more power to him. It's his prerogative if
Absolutely.
he wants to do that.
Love that.
The problem is that that is what so many people believe is the way. Like they think that's plan A, right?
Yeah. Put
And
yourselves in harm's way.
yes, put yourself in harm's
Set a
way,
table for your enemy in the presence of your enemy.
right? To convert them, right?
Mhm.
And what I learned on this journey of, um, because I went looking for answers about, like, well, how can Black people get out of this predicament? How can we intervene against the flow of racist power? And I ended up reading so much about nonviolent struggle, and what I found was that really, in the past, at least,
Mhm.
um, movements that have moved the needle for for oppressed people have not really made their first strategy
Mhm.
or part of their strategy at all. We're going to come to the table with our opponents and try to convince them that they should stop abusing us. It has been
Hmm.
using whatever resources they have to force their enemy to get their knee off their neck, right?
Yeah.
And many of those movements, or actually all the ones that I'm thinking of and talking about, have been through nonviolent struggle. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not saying that there's no place for armed resistance or armed struggle and all that kind of stuff. Just not the tradition that I'm a part of. you
Right.
know. And what I found was in looking at the civil rights movement and looking at freedom movements around the world, oppressed and marginalized people have used nonviolent struggle to disrupt the power of their oppressors over them.
Mhm.
Whether or not their oppressors want to come to the table and discuss it or not. In fact, when we think of the civil rights movement, Dr. King is someone that people bring up a lot, and it's almost like people think that Dr. King like went into a city and like called all the white leaders to sit down at some meeting and talk to them and persuaded them with his eloquence to take
Mm-mm.
down the whites only signs and all that kind of stuff. When what he really did was go into cities with a bunch of other civil rights leaders and other organizations, and they shut cities down.
Mhm.
That's what they did. They disturb the peace. They disrupt the power until the powers that be are pressured to respond to their demands.
Mhm. I mean, something that just came to mind was
Mhm,
what happened in Canada a few weeks ago with the truckers
mhm,
who
mhm,
stopped Canada cold in its tracks. And I'm
mhm.
just like, there's something about the power of organizing. There's some
Yes.
around some, and that was nonviolent. They literally just went and parked their trucks and stopped things
Yeah.
from moving.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a pretty powerful act. I'm not saying it was for good, but it was well
Mhm.
organized. And it's like, I just wonder, like,
Mhm.
it was something like I remember like a sermon like I saw you post like where you illustrated the power of everybody to say no through
Mm.
Simon Says, because you were
Yeah,
saying,
we play Simon Says.
yeah, Simon Says, touch your nose. All right, touch your nose.
Mhm.
Simon didn't say that. It's like, okay, Simon says, punch your neighbor in the gut. And then nobody moves. And you're like, not for
Yeah,
real.
it
Simon
doesn't.
says, punch your neighbor in the gut. And nobody moved. And he was
Right.
just like, and you were like, what just happened?
Right. Right. And that is such a that is like the principle of power that underlines nonviolent struggle that a lot of people don't know about is that, the status quo is sustained by our consent to it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that means that it can be disrupted by our mass defiance, right? And that's what people were organizing in the civil rights movement. And I'm going to connect this back to the question that you asked too, is that like
Mm-hmm.
why did we believe that all that's needed is kind words and you know uh, intimate conversation to change this? Well, because we've been given a bunch of ideas about how social progress works that are false, and and there are a bunch of ideas about what creates change, strategies for change that will never work, and we're preoccupied with them. So we keep on trying these things that don't work,
Mm.
and we keep getting the same result.
Which is not getting the thing we want.
Right? We just keep having the same conversations with people who are not really listening. Right? And I'm not
Right.
saying that they never work. Like there are conversations that do, shift people's perspectives. But racism is about power. It's
Mm-hmm.
about how it is about how power is disproportionately distributed along the color line, you know, and not just power, but also resources and privileges and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm.
And so, in order, I'll say it the way that Jonathan Smucker says, who is another organizer who wrote a book called Hegemony How To. And he says, it's very simple. In order to disrupt power, you have to contend in the realms of power, right?
Mm.
So if me and Jimmy are friends and Jimmy has a lot of racist ideas and all that kind of stuff, and I want to sit down and talk to Jimmy and help him understand that the ideas that he holds are very anti-black and very problematic. That's fine. But how does that change the police budget so that money is going into under-resourced Black and brown neighborhoods
Mm.
to provide healthcare and housing and those kind of stuff that would reduce crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, like alleviate the so-called need for so much policing, right?
Mm-hmm.
My conversation with Jimmy, unless he is the city manager, is
Is not
probably
gonna do
not
much.
going to have that much of an effect.
Mm.
And maybe the effect is there, but it's not nearly as large as it would be if we were to just find out who makes a decision about the city budget and then
Mm-hmm.
get 3.5% of the population of that city or more,
Mm-hmm.
to engage in sustained nonviolent action until that decision maker, you know,
Mm-hmm.
reallocated funds to those neighborhoods so that they can reduce crime. The conversation with Jimmy, to whatever effect it might have, unless he's the city
Mm-hmm.
manager or the mayor, depending on how your local government structure is,
Right.
um, is going to have an exponentially smaller effect than organizing a bunch of ordinary people to put pressure on the system.
Mm-hmm. Oof. Also, my Slytherin Enneagram 8 ass was thinking, I'm just like, let's Atlanta is ready. Let's do something weird. Um, Especially because like our midterms are coming up. So like I've been working with some DSA people around like getting some around like we're doing a lot of what's it called? Unionizing help
Mm.
work right now.
Mhm.
But it's because of that, it's just like we can't, talking to my mom about why a living wage is a good thing is good and well, but my mother does not control the wages in my city, you know? Like fuck trying to convert your family. They don't want to hear it. Just like figure out who needs to listen to you and make them listen.
No,
What is
I hear that. Go ahead, please.
no for you? This is no. I was gonna say the question like for you when people are reading this book. What's at least the one thing you want them to walk away knowing,
Oh yeah. Well,
or a couple things? I always say like,
yeah.
"What's the one thing?" I'm just like, a few
Well,
things.
the book is organized in an interesting way for the type of book that it is, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there is there's a bunch of my story in there because part of it is like it's important that you get to know the author, right? Like who is this
Correct.
person that's talking to you, right? So that's
Good
in there.
guy. Nice guy.
There's a bit of thank you. There's a bit of memoir in there, right? But my ultimate goal in putting this book together was really to share with people the lessons that I learned about how nonviolent struggle can
Mm-hmm.
be organized in a more effective way to intervene against the flow of racist power. Because what I've been seeing is, we have this kind of outrage cycle, right? Someone is
Yeah.
murdered, someone is killed by the police, there's a huge reaction, a bunch of protests. The protests last until we're tired or until the powers that be beat us down enough to where now then we're tired of getting beat down.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody goes home. We nurse our wounds, and the news cycle forgets. A bunch of people also forget, and then who knows how long it'll be until the next trigger event, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got tired of the outrage cycle.
Mm.
And that's exactly why I said I need to learn more about the civil rights movement. I need to learn more about nonviolent struggle. Started studying that. And I found so much. Like, for instance, um, we often conflate resistance or revolution or whatever you want to call it and protest, right? But
Mm-hmm.
protest is just one broad category of nonviolent tactics, right? Marches and signs and rallies and all this kind of stuff. That is just one category of action.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the most powerful, like it has its merits. It can draw people into the movement, it can raise awareness about the issue, all that kind of stuff. But then, like Gene Sharp, for instance, is a icon of nonviolent struggle, um, a scholar, and he divided these into three categories. So you have protest and persuasion, which is the first, and then you escalate to civil disobedience, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
you get a lot of people doing things like, okay, riding the segregated bus, integrating the bus themselves or
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And then you have a whole nother category of direct interventions, which you have, like hunger strikes and things like that, which, just a note, since I mentioned hunger strikes, don't do that
Mm-hmm.
unless you're like Oprah. If Oprah did a hunger strike, that would make a difference, But so anyway, these are the kinds of things that I learned as I went through this. And I share these things in the book. And I want for people to walk away with the feeling that I had when I read this stuff and discovered this stuff, which was, oh my gosh, there's hope. you know,
Mm.
we can do something. Because just another tidbit. Like, I learned as I was studying this stuff that nonviolent struggle has been twice as effective as armed struggles in the past. So there's a lot of people who say we can't overcome racism if we don't take up arms.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's the only way, which seems like a very unlikely scenario for us in
Right.
America. But
Right. Right. Right.
luckily,
Right.
like you don't have to, because there have been plenty of situations throughout the world where arms were not necessary. Also, it only in that same study, which was by Erica Chenoweth and Maria J. Stephan, they found that no regime had been able to withstand the active, sustained nonviolent resistance of just 3.5% of the population. Right. So there's
Just three
also
and a
this,
half percent.
just 3.5%. And so there's all these people who feel like, well, if we're going to create change, you need everybody, you need every single person to get on board and do this kind of stuff. That's not realistic. and good news, not necessary. So these are things that I include in the book because I'm telling you about my journey of learning these things and how and what provoked me to look into these things. And so I'm really hoping that people walk away with this information. And I'm really hoping that some people walk away and, you know, do what I did, tell everybody. You know,
Yeah.
join a good, anti-racist organization that's organizing against, some of these systemic problems, these systemic racist these instances of systemic racism or these institutions of systemic racism. And we have more informed people joining our movement so that our movements can go stronger and more strategic. What's one more thing I want to say about that? In a recent conversation I had with Erica Chenoweth, who is a world-class scholar on nonviolent struggle, she told me that around the world, according to her new research, we're losing more battles than we're winning through nonviolent struggle around the world. But the research is showing that it's not because there's something inherently weak about going about things in a nonviolent manner, but that people are not using these strategies the strategies and the more disruptive tactics that we know tend to move the needle from the type of information that I'm showing. And so I saw that in 2020 on the street where a lot of people want to go out to the street and express themselves, and that's valid. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're angry, we're frustrated, we're upset. Like, it makes sense to say publicly and loudly, this is wrong and I don't like it. However, it's a faulty theory of change at work there, that if we all just go out to the streets in big numbers and say we don't like this, it'll change. No. The powers that be already know that you don't like it. And they don't care. They don't care that you don't like it. They have to be, I know some people aren't going to like this, but they have compelled to meet the needs, the will of the people. They have to be. And you don't just do that through a march or a demonstration, you know. You do that through some of the more disruptive actions, like, boycotts are more disruptive. Strikes are more disruptive. And for those who say, "Oh, but strike can have an inordinate or a negative effect on the people," because well, that's where you organize alternatives so that people can strike, right? So you pool money and you organize ways of care, that directly intervene. So I say all that to say to kind of illustrate the importance of this, right? Like, we are losing so many battles through nonviolent struggle because a lot of people don't understand how nonviolent struggle works. And they're not going to read the books that I read to understand it. So here is a book that will give you, like, I think it gives you enough, right, to work with, and that it can whet your appetite to get it to go deeper.
I want it. Can I have it? Can I
Yeah,
have the
for sure.
book?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm thrilled. Also, can I tell you, when you talk about this, you light up.
Yeah.
You really do. And like it's apparent that, and I know this is like I'm not trying to be like fluffy. Maybe I am trying to be a little fluffy with you. That's who I am. It is good to see you light up. And I hope you know that I'm not the only one who sees it.
Thank you.
Like, all the pressure you feel around stuff, it's okay. Because guess what? At the end of the day, you are a phenomenal person. And also, this book is going to be such a gift to the world and to so many people.
I
Like,
really
it's
hope
going to,
so.
I mean, I have no doubt. Like, sitting here, like, I've already learned a shit ton of things, and now my mind's already churning. I'm like, okay, so I have this thing, this network that I'm creating. How do I start to organize all of these deconstructing white people in all of these different places into doing things that are going to be helpful?
Yeah.
That's actually
Yeah.
something I'm trying to do with the Deconstruction Network. They have like a Google Maps of like all over the world of just like where all the pockets of people are, and I'm like,
Oh,
this is how
wow.
we do it, and it's
Oh,
free.
wow.
You can
Yeah.
access it for free.
Mm.
Anyways, that was a non-spawn. I have been ending every episode with 5 questions. It's not quite rapid fire, but
Mhm.
it's just one thing. on each
Gotcha.
thing.
Hmm.
So, Andre Henry, what's one
Hmm.
thing that you like about yourself?
Ooh. um, I like that I turn negative things, negative experiences into art. I like that.
Mm. What's one thing you are super proud of?
Um, I'm proud of pursuing my dreams no matter what.
Hell yeah. What is one thing that is a pet peeve to you or pisses you off?
Mm.
It can be shallow, it can be deep, it can be anywhere on that spectrum.
um, a pet peeve of mine is when people do not consider, like when they have conflict with someone, they don't consider how their own actions might have helped create that scenario.
Taking responsibility for their part in
Yeah, exactly.
something. We,
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm.
What's something you're super committed to?
Um, I feel very committed to my music, and also, even though I don't have the capacity that I did before, I still feel very much committed to playing my part, in the movement for Black
Mm-hmm.
lives.
Mm. What's one thing you want to do before you die?
Oh man, so many things. I want to produce a TV show. Yep. I don't want to say what it's about right now because I don't want anyone to steal the idea, but I really want to produce a TV show.
I think that would be dope.
Yeah, I would love
You
that.
got good taste.
Thank you.
Um, and so now comes the part where we have to say, tell the people on the internet where they can get all your books and like find your people and then give you money and things.
Yeah. Well, a great place to follow me is andrehenry.co. Because that will link to everything else. Like my mailing list is there. We send out an email every month. My social media profiles are there. So, you can find those links there. Yeah,
Sweet. And the book, All the White Friends I Could Not Keep, is going to be out on March 26th.
22nd. Yeah.
22nd, March
Mhm.
22nd. So I'll probably put this out right before that then. So people
Sweet.
can like swipe it up. I don't know what that was, that little cha-cha move I did. I don't know. Hey, thank you for being with me and doing, and it's always a pleasure to hang out with you, and B, it's always fun to do work with you like this. Like
Same.
you
Same.
teach me a shit ton, and I also just like love being around you.
I appreciate it too. I always enjoy spending time with you. Thanks
Mm,
for having me.